Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Gail. My name's Ron Pinelli, Vice President of Digital Research and Standards with the MRC. I appreciate you all sticking around. I think if you were here for the early morning session, there was a gentleman for Walmart who gave everybody a virtual high five for being here at 9 a.m. I want to do the same for you being here at almost 6 o'clock. But if you were also here for the earlier session where my colleague George Ivey had some representatives from Facebook and Google on the stage, you know a little bit about who MRC is and what we do. But a very quick recap, we work across the industry to help set standards for media measurement, and then we conduct audits against those standards. So specifically related to cross-media measurement, a lot of what we've been doing lately related to standard setting activities has been driven by an initiative called 3MS, or Making Measurement Make Sense. And what 3MS is a cross-industry initiative in the US between the IB, the 4As, and the ANA, whose goal really was to standardize digital metrics to make them more comparable to metrics that existed in traditional media. MRC had already been down a path to align with the 3MS principles. We had been setting standards with the IB related to digital measurement for some time when 3MS was born, so it made logical sense for 3MS to be executed by MRC. So we've been executing against the mission of 3MS, and the principles have brought you things like viewability, which was discussed today, invalid traffic and fraud standards, which were also discussed, as well as digital audience, all standards that MRC wrote against the 3MS mission. But the 3MS principles also stipulated that digital media should begin to be more comparable and integrated with other media, and as a result, MRC has jumped into a project to set cross-media measurement standards. We started the first phase related to video late 2017. We expect to be done, believe it or not, or at least near public comment by the end of 2018. And on the roadmap, we have things like digital and print combinations, and as well as looking at audio and cross-media environments as well. So I thought it would be a great juxtaposition if I came up in between Jacob speaking, talking about cross-device measurement, and then I was followed by the gentlemen that are going to come up and talk about large-scale data sets and integrating those, to give you something that's probably less exciting and more dry, but is nonetheless important, which is the quality underlying the techniques that are used to build cross-media measurement products. So I wanted to start by talking about device recognition, or measuring users across devices and cross-media environments. And I thought what Jacob laid out was really good, where he showed the different devices, and if you just counted them all, you'd have an overstatement of reach, and you have to identify the commonalities and deduplicate, et cetera, which is why the first posit that I would say is in our standards related to cross-media is that machine-based measurement shouldn't be misrepresented as people measurement. So you have to account for things like I've got multiple devices and multiple touch points, or their device sharing, and that should be transparent. You shouldn't just measure a computer or a device or a cookie or a browser and represent that as a unique person. Secondarily, if you're going to report users and persons, there has to be at least some data that's directly collected, some first-party data that's your truth set, if you will. And in fact, we have a posit in our standards that say if you're 100% modeling information, that's not acceptable. There has to be validated data underneath it. You heard Jacob talk about device graphs, and you'll hear terms in device graphs related to probabilistic and deterministic techniques and those types of things. And I'll just tell you a quick example that I think will help hammer at home. So there was a lady named Maria who was on stage a couple of sessions ago with Ericsson, I believe, that was talking about using cell signals and extrapolating location. And she was talking about markets. You can use cell towers to determine if somebody's in a market. Well, let's say you wanted to use that data to determine whether someone visited a retail location. Well, you could have a huge census data set of all the devices in, let's say, a country and what towers they interact with. But if you tried to use that on a probabilistic basis to determine whether I visited the store up the street, that would be highly inaccurate. You could do it, and people probably are doing that using modeling and algorithms, but it would be inaccurate. That's probabilistic. It's, I don't exactly know the values, and I'm using other data to determine it, and I have large-scale data. On the flip side, you could have deterministic data set. I could have a panel of 10,000 individuals, let's say, that have agreed to turn on location services and tell me specifically when they're going into locations, and I've set up geo-fences around retail locations, and I know exactly when they're in physical locations. That's deterministic data. The issues with that is there can be biases in it, there can be coverage gaps in it, and trying to extrapolate that to a larger population can be difficult. By combining those together and developing linkages between the data sets to say, where do I have both pieces of data such that I can learn about where I have one versus the other is what's important, and it's an important posit for cross-media measurement when you're thinking about deterministic and probabilistic data sets. The last thing I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention in cross-device tracking, we were talking about following someone, everything they use, determining who they are, those types of things. We can't forget about privacy. GDPR has been mentioned a couple of times up here. And what we're really trying to do is be circumspect when we're setting standards of those eventual requirements and making sure we're not asking measurement vendors to do something that runs afoul of privacy regulations. The second thing I wanted to talk about is data sets. So I believe the gentlemen that are going to come up after me are going to talk about using data sets, potentially retail, point of sale data information, and just a few posits related to data sets that when you're selecting data sources, you should make sure that it makes sense for the stated objectives of what you're trying to do. There should be research behind that. The data that you use and that you integrate, you should think about cleaning it. You should have quality control over it when you're integrating it. When you're relating data sets together and you're determining the variables that predict something, there should be demonstrable power behind those. There should be a statistical exercise that says, I've looked at these variables and I can prove over larger scale samples that they actually have predictive power. The sources of data, they should be disclosed. I'm a user of these data sets. I should know where they come from, what they are, what their capabilities and limitations are. If there are updates to this data, it should be timely reflected in the algorithms I build. And again, this point of truth set, that there should be some truth information, there should be some directly collected first-party data that serves as the validation to set algorithms, periodically train them, update them. And finally, the organization should adopt a culture of continuous improvement and quality research. So there was a gentleman earlier in the morning that said you should have executives around data and around research, and they shouldn't just be figureheads, they should actually have a team. We believe in that. We have a standard about continuous improvement, and that's in the cross-media standards, that you shouldn't just set it and forget it. You should continuously improve and study your methodology. That's all my time. My contact information is up here if you want to have a discussion that's longer than 7 minutes, or you want to participate in our cross-media working group, please reach out. We look forward to interacting with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.